Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to talk to you about the Capricorn winter solstice taking place on December 21st, 2024. In this channel, we talk about the astrological energy of the week ahead and how you can integrate it into your personal and spiritual growth. So, as I talk about this solstice, I'm also going to go into major important dates that are coming over the next couple of months. It's important to understand that it's a lot better to look at astrology, I think, and the year from quarter to quarter, right? So from solstice to equinox to solstice and so on and so forth, because then it gives us a better gauge as to what's going to prepare us for the next season and the next season and the next season. So in this episode, I'm going to touch on the chart of the winter solstice, and then I'm going to go over dates that are coming up that have to do with the unfolding of this winter solstice. So my intention is to keep this video as short as possible, but also so that you have something to come back to, right? Some dates to jot down on your calendar so that you can understand, okay, this astrological event is building from this astrological event. This thing that happened to me on this particular week is building from this other week. So this is how we tie astrology together. And this is how it becomes a tool for us to work with so that we can understand the unfolding of our process. So with that said, let's get started. Here is the chart of the winter solstice. And when we look at the chart of any season, right, whether it's a solstice or an equinox, we want to pay close attention to where the moon is. Obviously, we want to pay attention to where the sun is because that's going to tell us the season that it is, and it's at 0 degrees. And every single equinox and solstice takes place at what's called an Aries point, right? It's a 0 point at the cardinal signs of the zodiac, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. But why do we want to pay attention to where the moon is? Because the moon is going to give us the emotional flavor of the next couple of months and the aspects that the moon has at the time of a change of a season is going to tell us how we might experience some of the things that are ahead, what we're meant to really tie into emotionally with our heart, with our intuition. Okay. Now, at the time of this solstice, the moon is creating an opposition to Saturn in Pisces. So here is the moon at 13 degrees Virgo, creating an exact opposition to Saturn in Pisces. And what is Saturn? Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, the season that we're starting. So already we have this energy of, okay, we have to get down to business. So the moon in Virgo is concerned with minding the details, being discerning with what deserves our time, energy, and effort, making sure that the things that we're giving our time, energy, and effort to aren't draining us, that we aren't falling into the role of the martyr, the role of the savior, but that we are present and grounded enough within ourselves to mind ourselves and be able to discern, okay, this is actually something that I want to focus on. This isn't. This is where I need help. This is where I need to delegate. I think that this is actually a really great moon to have on a winter solstice, especially because when we look at it from the perspective of the day-to-day and the season that we're in, we're headed towards the end of a year and the beginning of a new one. This tends to be a time, regardless of our opinion around it or how we may feel about it, in which people set intentions and people set goals for what they want to do in the new year. Okay. So a moon in Virgo feels very appropriate for that. But we have to understand where we are coming from. So you all have been with me the last couple of weeks. We have been going through this transition, right? This feeling of, I'm not sure where I'm headed. I'm not sure what's ahead, but I know that I'm moving in that direction. There's been a lot of soul searching over the last couple of months because there is this understanding the way that I'm going to move forward is going to be very different. And what I love about the winter solstice that always takes us into a new calendar year is that it's in the sign of Capricorn. And yes, it's the winter time. Not everybody's going to get to work right ahead. I understand that. But here's also the thing. Capricorn energy, earth energy, right? Like Capricorn and Virgo, are energies about intention. And in a very practical way, intention is set when we create some kind of outline, some kind of plan, when we do set intentions that we say, okay, this to me feels doable at the very least for the next 3 to 4 months, which to me makes total sense, right? Because here we are saying within the next 3 to 4 months, which is from the winter solstice to the spring equinox, what do I want to focus on? Which is, I think, a much better way of looking at going into a new year versus looking at what am I going to promise myself to do for the next 12 months when we don't know how we're going to feel, right? I think there's a book, I'm totally going to butcher this, but I think it's called the 12-week year or something like that, that talks about breaking your year up into 12-week increments, which to me, as soon as I saw the title, and I remember reading this a very long time ago, I thought, oh, this makes so much more sense for, when we look at it from an astrological perspective, because as I mentioned earlier, every season is going to inform how we're setting ourselves up for the next season. So again, going back to the fact that this is the winter time, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, right? This is Capricorn energy in which we are implementing certain things that will take us into the spring, right? By the way, will also take us into eclipse season, and I'll give you those dates in a few moments. And this is where we set the intention to lay down the foundation, to plant the seeds, so that we can begin seeing something by the time the spring and summertime come, by the time the equinox and the Cancer solstice comes in June. Okay. So here we have Sun in Capricorn, 0 degrees. The ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. Saturn is in direct opposition to the moon. This is not the lightest aspect. This is actually quite a heavy aspect because here we're coming face to face in opposition. Here we have somewhat of a confrontation of the moon in Virgo saying, this is what I'm committing myself to. This is the list of things that I would love to get done within the next couple of months. And the opposition to Saturn is saying, oh, that responsibility can feel daunting. That is a lot. And so when we understand what we want to, air quotes, accomplish, right? Or really meet in terms of our intention, when we talk about a moon-Saturn opposition, in order for that energy to not feel daunting and heavy and overwhelming, and even making sure that we don't go into a state of, I haven't done enough, I'm behind, that's never going to happen, I'm never going to be able to do that, because that's a lower expression of that opposition, especially with the moon in Virgo. We have to be intentional about what we are devoting ourselves to. And devotion, the way that I've come to learn it and appreciate it, especially this last year, is the only way that I can really be devoted to something is if I love it, is if it's aligned with my heart and my soul, right? And so then that daunting energy, that energy that feels like I have to take care of everything by myself, and the sun in Capricorn, which is this is my responsibility, and if I don't do this, is success or failure, takes us into no. If I'm going to set an intention for something, if I'm going to set an intention for one thing, how does it align with my soul? Why is this important? Because this is the first Capricorn season, and 2025 is going to be the first year in 16 years where we don't have to expect a Pluto in Capricorn. The reason that this matters is because now we really know that we are in a different chapter, in a different era. So the way that Pluto in Capricorn transformed Capricorn energy and our approach to Capricorn energy over the last 16 years absolutely comes into account in this winter solstice. Because now Capricorn, instead of being the energy that moves towards things, that moves towards building, that moves towards success, that moves towards, creating that legacy, it's no longer coming from what's expected of any of us societally, and more so, no, this is what I've learned feels true to me and to my soul. So when we look at the opposition between, again, Capricorn's ruler Saturn to the moon in Virgo, this is much more about what am I committed to, right? What am I devoted to? How does this responsibility that I'm taking on actually make me feel? Does it make me feel constricted? Am I coming face to face with certain insecurities, with certain ideas about myself that I'm not good enough? So all of a sudden, all of this information, we can look at it through a different lens because we're understanding that the way that we're moving towards the things that we want to build, towards the things that we want to see grow, towards the things that we actually want to commit ourselves to, we can really discern Moon and Virgo. Okay, is this a past narrative based on past experiences in which maybe things didn't turn out the way that I thought they were, but this gets to be different because I now know that I'm going into something from a heart space, from my soul space, and not from something that is expected of me. I also want to point out that I think that a lot of this for plenty of people is going to have to do with maybe not doing something right away, maybe not setting off to build something right away, to create something right away. I think that for some people, the commitment, the first 3 to 4 months of the year is going to be, how do I go with it and get into my soul? Because in January, the nodes are going to switch signs from Aries Libra to Virgo Pisces, and the North Node is going to go into Pisces, and the emphasis is going to be soul. Now, is that the case for everyone? No. And I'll touch on that in a few moments, and I'll explain a few different ways that we can look at the North Node moving into Pisces, because eventually that North Node is going to create a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces. That is destiny, the destiny of growth, North Node in Pisces coming together with Saturn, the planet of tangible physical manifestations of things that we have worked towards. Okay. So there is a lot of emphasis around creating, around manifestation, around doing something that feels honest to us. And we have to remember that that doesn't have to look like something in the material world, because there's also soul growth that eventually manifests a different way of living in our external reality. So what is Mercury doing? So Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, of the moon, right? And at the time of the and at the time of the solstice, Mercury and the moon are actually at a square to one another. It's a pretty wide square, right? Because the moon is at 13 degrees Virgo, Mercury is at 8 degrees Sagittarius. And we have to remember that Mercury just came out of a retrograde. It's been several days, it's been about a week and a half or so, but it's still, we're still just coming out of it. And so when the moon and Mercury are at a square to one another, It's almost like our mind and our heart don't meet. It's like our head is saying something and our heart is telling us something else, and we just can't land on why can't these two things align? Why do I feel so torn? Why do I feel like there's an inner struggle, right? Because the moon in Virgo, and you want to be mindful of this, the moon in Virgo can have the desire of, I need to know exactly how this is going to turn out. I need to be certain of the outcome of the thing that I am going to commit myself to doing. Mercury in Sagittarius is, what is the best possible outcome? And what if I set the intention to be pleasantly surprised, right? Mercury in Sagittarius isn't just a sign. It's not a dummy, right? That energy is not founded on anything groundless, but it is an energy that opens itself up to the possibilities of life. It is an energy that says, okay, this is the intention that I'm setting, and I have a desire and an idea for it to turn a certain way, but I'm still open and optimistic to where the universe takes me, to any synchronicities that may happen along the way, to any pleasant surprises that may just actually make this happen faster than I would have anticipated. So that 90-degree angle, the square between the moon and Mercury, can feel like I need to know exactly how this is going to turn out. But on the other hand, I'm really optimistic and I'm gonna let the outcome go and it's gonna be okay. Right? Okay. At the same time, this Mercury in Sagittarius is also creating a square to Saturn in Pisces. So when Saturn and Mercury are at a square, again, we have this element of things feeling really big, really daunting, too much responsibility. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? Am I capable? Am I possible? Right? And I say it in that way because we have a T square between Saturn, the moon, and Mercury, right? I haven't even gotten to Jupiter yet, which I will in a second. But when Saturn and Mercury are involved, we can't go there if we are not integrating the fact that we still get to be present, that things happen one step at a time, that we get to come back to self. Now, an integrated version of this square is presence and is actually saying, you know what, between now and March and April, I'm going to commit myself to one, two, three things max. And this is what I'm going to do. And maybe I don't go to the extreme and try to do something new every single day, but maybe I commit myself to doing it once a week, once every other day, right? Because wherever Saturn is involved, the element of time is there. Saturn is known as Father Time, right? Saturn is known as timeline, karma, manifestation. Everything has a cycle, and Saturn is the one that makes sure that it manifests right on time. So this element of time is there. So if we're able to say, this is what I'm going to, again, devote myself to, because let's say that by this point, we're already clear. This is what aligns with me. This is what feels honest to me. This is what feels honest to my heart. Okay. Then what we want to be mindful about, because this isn't something that works for everybody. For some people, it works really well to break their weeks, to break their months up, right? This is week one, and this is what I'm going to accomplish. Week two, this is what I'm going to accomplish. Week three, week four, so on and so forth, right? For some people, that works really great. I know that as a Capricorn, right? I've had periods of time in my life where that has worked really well and it has felt really good. And my Capricorn energy was satisfied with, you know what? I created a plan of a couple of weeks and I actually did everything. I checked the boxes. Beautiful. That doesn't work for everybody. I've had periods of time where the last thing I want is to plan anything. But what this is asking is for committedness in yourself, trust in yourself. Can you, at the very least, trust that if you take a few steps at a time, that if you do a few of the things that you have been procrastinating on, or, just for some reason not getting to, that if you do a couple of those things, that those things, at the very least, they'll be done. They will be off the checklist, right? I'm putting it in this way of perhaps not extremes, but just giving you different points of views because everybody works a different way. And Saturn is the type of energy that is very, it's very linear, it's very organized, it's very, sometimes very rigid. And that's not the place that we want to fall into, especially because we're moving into an era where we're meant to be a little bit more soul-led. But the thing is that we have to be very real, right? We have to be very understanding and responsible about the fact that if we do want to see certain things come to fruition in our life, it does require some input, some effort, right? Some work. Because when we talk about, I think that when we talk about the highest expression of manifesting, for instance, manifesting isn't just about wishing for something and then crossing your fingers and then it's going to come true. Manifesting is about, this is what I envision. This is what feels aligned with my soul, first and foremost. This is what feels aligned with who I am at this moment in time, my place and purpose in the world, my message to the world, whatever it is for you. And then we begin to take action towards that thing that is aligned with our heart and soul. To me, that is the highest expression of beginning to manifest something, because there is something really beautiful about putting in some effort, commitment, action towards the things that we want to see come to fruition. Because the fact of the matter is that there is nothing more satisfying in life than to say, I imagined something, I desired something, and I actually made it come true. I actually created it. I actually committed to it. Because what's the point? Who we become in the process. So whenever we're committing to something, whenever we're committing to a vision, to something we want to manifest, what we're really committing to is to ourselves. We're really committing into the person who we become in the process of that. And when it's aligned with our soul, that's where true satisfaction comes from. Because I believe we live in a world in which manifesting things is actually quite easy. Because we live in a doer world. We live in a world that is very much focused on productivity. And if that is something that we are very much identified with, we're actually going to be quite successful in this world. But what we may not feel at the end of that is a connection to the thing that we have manifested. And that's my point. That we are moving into an era where Pluto and Capricorn transformed that Capricorn energy and said, you're no longer doing things just for the sake of doing them. You are no longer just climbing the mountain and climbing the wrong mountain. What mountain do you want to climb, right? And in order for you to understand that, there has to be some introspection and some soul search, which is what I think has been the point of the last couple of months, really between August, September, and the middle of December, truly, through Sagittarius season. Okay. Now, it's important to also look at the opposition. It's a wide opposition between Mercury in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Gemini. I've talked about this opposition the last couple of weeks. And to me, this is, again, a grander vision, a really big vision. I'm excited about the future, right? We have Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, retrograde in Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury, where it's currently transiting the sign of Sagittarius. So we have this connection between these two planets in each other's signs. To me, that feels like we're coming up with ideas. I think it's a very creative energy. We're coming up with ideas. We feel really excited. Now, the flip side to this is that we may have too many ideas. That we may say, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to start this, and I want to. And while that's really beautiful, because I think we are in a creative time, I think that there is an air of optimism in the air for people where if you're in the space of, you know what, this is actually really possible, you get really excited and you start thinking about everything that is possible for you. But this is new. What you don't want is to lose the intention of, is this tied to me, right? Is this aligning with my soul? Because Jupiter and Gemini can be too much of too much. Too much information, too many ideas, too many options, and nothing landing on nothing, kind of getting lost in all of the options and all of the ideas, getting lost in what everyone else is doing. And maybe in order to be successful, I need to do that, and then I need to do that, and then I need to do the other thing, right? Come back to self, come back to center. Because I think that right now we're in a space in which, because this is a new era, because this is new energy, because a lot of us are stepping into a different part of ourselves, a different part of our lives, a different part of our careers, we're kind of looking for a blueprint. We're looking for something that gives us some kind of direction, especially if this is new. And so Jupiter in Gemini represents that energy of, oh my God, I have to do all of those things, right? As a coach, for instance, right? I have to have the podcast and I have to have the YouTube channel and I have to write a book and I have to be on all of the social medias. Now, the question right there is, do you want to? Does it feel honest to you? Does it feel like a creative, expansive process? Because I'll share with you, I know successful coaches who don't even have a website. They have built beautiful businesses that align with their soul, that have been word of mouth. They have collaborated in different ways with different people, but social media and being online is not their thing. And this is what I'm talking about here. They have created something, committed to something, devoted themselves to something in a way that feels honest to them. And so that Jupiter retrograde in Gemini in opposition to Mercury, if we're not careful, again, the sense of overwhelm, all of the things I have to do. No, it's you get to be excited about the things you actually want to do. Okay. At the time, of course, Jupiter is creating a square, a 90-degree angle to Saturn in Pisces. Saturn and Jupiter have been at a square with one another all of 2024, and they will continue to be really through most of 2025, even in different signs. Jupiter square Saturn is the slow build. Jupiter in Gemini, Jupiter wants to build all of the things really big, really quickly, right now, all of the abundance right now. And Saturn, the square to Saturn is saying, no, 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 no. This isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. There will be some delays. You will move slowly. You will change your mind along the way about certain things and the outcome of those. And that's a gift. To us in our human mind, it's very frustrating. We hate waiting. We hate waiting. We hate being patient. Why isn't it happening now? Why isn't it happening now? Does that mean that I'm a failure? We hate it. And yet Saturn, in its process, in its pace, it's saying, if you commit, I promise you'll have a beautiful outcome. But you have to take things one step at a time, and you have to trust divine timing. I think that if there is any placement in the zodiac that represents divine timing, is Saturn in Pisces. Because Pisces is this element of being in touch with divinity. And Saturn is the timing. This is the marrying of soul and mind. This is the marrying of 3D and 5D reality. Can you trust the process, right? Can you trust yourself? Can you remain faithful in the process, in yourself, in your vision, in your desire towards something? And can you appreciate the pace of it all? Those who trust can afford to wait and wait without anxiety. I've always loved that quote by Gabby Bernstein. And this is what this is asking us, because I want to ask you something else. And this is from experience and observation of many readings. When Saturn is involved and something doesn't come to manifestation in the way that we think it should, it's usually because we're learning significant lessons along the way, always in all the ways. And if you had everything you want today, right now, if you had accomplished everything you wanted this year, would you have learned the lessons that you learned this year? And some of you may say, well, I would have preferred not to learn the lessons and just have the things. But remember, it's about who you're becoming in the process. And let me ask you, who are you now at the end of 2024 versus who you were at the beginning of 2024? Who is the you now at the end of 2024 that is moving into 2025? And if you had manifested all of the things that you wanted and envisioned, would those manifestations have been a distraction of how your soul has evolved, or would they have expanded it? Would you have had the wherewithal? Would you have had the consciousness, the awareness of what your soul was going through in order to hold your manifestations with the degree of love that they deserve to be held with? This is where astrology becomes really beautiful and a tool of self-reflection and self-awareness, because it isn't just about, Jupiter and Saturn are squared and things are not happening fast enough. Why am I here? That's a great question. Why am I still here? What am I learning? Who have I become? Who am I becoming? I am very fortunate to have clients, coaching clients that I've worked with for a few years, and the changes that I have seen them move through just in this year, who they have become, right? It has been a buildup from the last couple of years, but this year, the way that things have landed for them, the transformation that they've had is the women that they have become along the way. They are much stronger, wiser, sure of themselves. They are much more assertive. But because they had to experience everything they experienced in order to understand what was happening. If some of the money manifestations had come, if some of the job manifestations had come, their attention would have gone elsewhere other than inward, where they have been moving through this entire year and who they are now. It's just so beautiful to observe and witness. Does that mean that that's where they're going to stay? Absolutely not. But the women that they became this year and the women that are stepping into 2025, I think have a much greater bandwidth and appreciation and sense of self to welcome the things to welcome the things that they're envisioning and that they desire. That's the difference, right? So here we have a mutable T-square between the moon in Virgo, Saturn in Pisces, Mercury in Sagittarius, and Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. Mutable T-squares remind us to be flexible. Keep your eye on the prize, but remain flexible in the approach. Another thing that a Mars-Pluto opposition can do at a very individual level internally is coming face to face with our greatest insecurities, right? So here I say I have this vision, here I say I'm moving towards this thing, but these are the insecurities that are coming up. If there is anything I can leave you with ever, is any insecurity, any self-limiting belief, any doubt, any heavy negative thought that's coming up for you, is so that you can see that it exists, you can do what you need to do with it and release it, right? Of course, everyone has their process. Everything is a process. You'll do with that what you will, and you will transcend it, because I do believe that we can transcend these parts of ourselves. And by transcendence, I mean that we no longer identify with those parts of ourselves, but we can understand that sometimes they still exist, right? And this is what Mars retrograde in opposition to Pluto is doing. What are some of the things that are coming up for you that make you feel small? That make you think, maybe I can't do this? There's so much responsibility that comes with this. This thing is so big. This thing is so new. I've never done this before. Maybe that's not for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. Do you see how all of these components are so important? Especially as we move into 2025, like a year like 2025, which is a year of transition that is setting us up for 2026 and 2027. Mars retrograde will inevitably slow things down. It will slow our roll. Slow your roll. Why are you rushing? If you know that something is meant for you, why are you rushing it? A lot of times we rush through things because we don't want to go through the discomfort of going through it. We don't want to face the discomfort of the negative thoughts that come up for us along the way. And this is definitely making us face those. And there's a gift to that. Because if we are trying to find the connection, the alignment of our soul to the things that we are devoting ourselves to, we need to understand and see what's standing in the way of that. And a lot of times it is those self-imposed limiting belief systems that are in the way of us saying, oh, this is what feels right to my heart. This is what feels right to my soul. Therefore, this is what I'm actually going to move towards. Guys, this is astrology is such a beautiful tool because it invites us to ask ourselves these bigger questions. It's not just about what's going to come, what are the alignments for that? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they going to make my thing manifest? And so what begins to happen is that the external reality takes a back seat. Not that it's not important, but it takes a back seat because what we begin to understand is the world really reflects what I carry inside. And when I change what I carry inside, the world will also reflect that back to me. And when I observe what's happening inside, when I learn to alchemize it with love, the manifestations are different. And I actually do contribute better energy to the collective. Nothing is separate from anything else, nor are we separate from the collective. And we will actually make an impact on the world to the degree that we're willing to look at ourselves and what's happening within us. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the part of the video in which I talk about some of the aspects that are coming up in the next couple of months that I think you should jot down, that I think you should know a little bit about, and that way you have a really good grounding about what, the first 3 to 4 months of the year are about for you. So the first event after the winter solstice is the new moon in Capricorn at 10 degrees Capricorn taking place on December 30th, so right before the new year. And one of the things I forgot to mention earlier is that at the time of the solstice, the sun in Capricorn, the first couple of days, is creating also a T-square to the north and the south node in Aries and Libra. This is important because what this is telling us is that over the next couple of months, whatever intention we set with the solstice to commit ourselves to devote ourselves to, needs to be a soul devotion. Because where the nodes are involved, we're talking about our soul's growth, our soul's karma, our soul's evolution. And so the North Node in Aries is the invitation. This is what you've been working for. This is what you've been working to understand about yourself over the last 18 months, right? The South Node in Libra is saying, and this is all that you've left behind. And this is how your life has changed. And this is how your relationships have changed because you've gotten to this point to where with this solstice, you're making an intention of committing to yourself and to your life in a different way from a different space within yourself. And so then that leads us to this new moon in Capricorn on December 30th, where between December 30th and June of 2025, when, by the way, Jupiter will make its ingression into Cancer, we have 6 months to, again, commit ourselves to something, devote our time, energy, effort, into something that's going to lay the grounded foundation for something new that we are bringing to life, that we are attempting to manifest. But that thing that we are attempting to manifest, attempting to bring to fruition is something that we have been thinking about, something that has come from us in 2024 with all of the lessons around relationships, around how we have to prioritize ourselves in order to be this light in the world. Because a lot of the things, and from speaking to people in readings and again, coaching clients, we are looking to bring a part of our soul, our heart out into the world because there's great awareness of what is happening around the world. There is great awareness of the things that, of the atrocious events taking place throughout the world. So I think that has elevated people's consciousness to where now they're asking themselves, how is it that I can contribute different energy to the world no matter what I do? I don't have to be a coach. I don't have to be on YouTube. I don't have to be an astrologer. I don't have to do tarot without doing any of that. If I know that I am expressing my soul's light, I know that that light is also creating something different in the collective. And so this new moon in Capricorn, like every other new moon in Capricorn, is what do you want to build? The difference now is, again, that Capricorn energy has been transformed. My point is that people are looking to set the intention to build something, but with their twist on it. And that twist comes from what they feel inside, from observing how certain things have been built over time and saying, I don't agree with that. I think that's outdated. I think that's outmoded. I think we're missing the soul of the thing that we're trying to share with the rest of the world. Okay. That takes us to on January 13th, Mars retrograde is going to ingress into Cancer. And it's going to be a part of the full moon in Cancer. Okay. So Mars retrograde will now go into Cancer. So that retrograde energy that we have been working with in Leo for several weeks, really since the beginning of December, will now go back into the sign of Cancer. And so here's what we're going to really ask ourselves: what's worth fighting for? Where do I feel safe to express myself openly and vulnerably? With who? Who feels like home, right? Whether it's actual family or chosen family. I think this uh, Mars retrograde in Cancer, being part of the full moon in Cancer, I think is going to bring stuff up in family dynamics. Because think about it. If we are moving into a new era, if we are doing things differently, and here we have the planet of anger, resentment, aggression, retrograde in the sign of family during a full moon, which tends to be a very emotional time for people, I think some stuff around family is going to come up. Now, whether you're around family or not, obviously you're the only one who knows that, but I think at least internally, there are some stuff around family that we're going to remember, right? With that Mars retrograde and the full moon in Cancer, and that are also going to inform us about this is why I move through the world in the way that I do. And I no longer want to do that, right? And doing whatever it is that you have to do in your own process, in your own therapy, in your own journey to see things in a different way. In January, we are also going to have the nodes switch signs. So depending on whether you use the true node or the mean node, the dates vary, but it's in January, right? So in January, North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra is going to move to North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. And the themes are going to be different. I think that the North Node in Aries brought us face to face with our anger, with our courage, with our sense of self, with self-assertion. I know that we have had to have a lot of difficult conversations with important people in our lives in 2024. The South Node in Libra, this is how we've been codependent. This is how we have built a relationship, not from the most independent selves, but from the parts of us that we're trying to keep things at an even keel and we're not trying to upset one another at the expense of ourselves, right? And then North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo changes the themes quite a bit. And I think that the North Node in Pisces is really going to be focused on our relationship to spirituality, our relationship to the universe, to source, to light, to God, whatever feels the most honest to you. So think about how the North Node in Aries needed to bring us back to ourselves so that then there is room and space for us to have a different relationship with our spirituality. And the fact that that's what's going to happen within, the first couple of weeks or the first month of the solstice tells us that the connection in the relationship to spirituality plays a big role in how we're manifesting the next foundations of our lives and how we're manifesting the next things that feel important to us in our lives. And so the South Node in Virgo is going to say, can you trust that if you show up consistently, whatever consistent is for you, and can you trust that if you do enough, right? You don't overdo, you don't overwork, you don't put your health at risk by burning out. But if you trust that you can do enough, can your attention and faith go more towards spirituality? And again, it's the marrying of spirit and human. It's the marrying of the 5D to the 3D. It's this newer expression of manifestation that I was talking about earlier. On January 21st, we have the Sun in Aquarius come to a conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius. This is a beautiful new beginning. I'm going to take you back to the weekend of December 6th, where Venus came together with Pluto in Aquarius, when Venus ingressed into Aquarius. All I'm going to say is think about what happened in your relationships during that weekend, perhaps even the week leading up to that weekend or the week following that weekend. What happened in terms of relationships? What realizations that you have? What came up around money? What realizations did you have about your relationship with money? Perhaps you realized, oh, I would like to make more money, and this is actually possible for me. And how does that feel in my body, right? The sun now coming to a conjunction to Pluto, which Venus did, several weeks back, is saying at the time that was just a desire. When Venus came to a conjunction to Pluto, there was an amplification, an intensification of that desire. Now, the sun represents how we show up for that desire. The sun represents what am I going to do towards that desire, right? How am I showing up for relationships differently? How do my relationships actually look differently, right? A few days later, on January 29th, we have the new moon in Aquarius. So you're going to want to pay attention to the things that you're feeling into around January 21st, right? Because the sun implies us, our identity, our vitality, our ego, how we're going to show up for the thing that I think a lot of people are going to set forth things in motion with that new moon in Aquarius. On February 4th, Jupiter goes direct in Gemini. And I think that all of the things that we have been thinking about, right, those oppositions to Mercury and Sagittarius that we've been experiencing the last couple of weeks of 2024, it's like finally there can be this feeling of, you know what, I've chosen, and this is what I'm going to move forward with. I had all of these ideas before, but I've somehow organized them, or I've somehow made a decision as to what I'm really going to move forward with, and that Jupiter in Gemini is going to be a really great impulse. On February 12th, we have the full moon in Leo, and this full moon in Leo is going to include an opposition to Mercury in Aquarius and a square to Uranus in Taurus. I would not be surprised if this full moon in Leo actually came with a lot of manifestations for people. I think for some people, they can come with like really beautiful manifestations around creativity, around something that feels true for you in your heart. Leo is the sign of the heart. because Leo is also the sign of love. I think it can also come with really beautiful manifestations for couples who have been working, intentionally working through things, a greater sense of love, a greater sense of understanding. And the square to Uranus can really be like seeing a turning point, seeing habits change, seeing patterns change in relationship. I think that this can also be a time of a lot of, surprises, pleasant surprises. If these are unpleasant surprises, can you remember that the things that are meant for you will find you and that those that aren't meant for you will get out of the way? And sometimes the universe gets things out of the way in a quite aggressive way. So keep that in mind as well. But that full moon in Leo in February, I think is going to be loud. It's going to be very noticeable in all of our lives in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's going to inform a lot as to how we move through eclipse season in March. But before we get to March, we need to talk about February 23rd, where Mars finally goes direct. And Mars goes direct in the sign of Cancer. I think that by this time, informed by that full moon in Leo, February 12th, we will know, or we will have a clear idea, oh, this is how I'm moving forward. That doesn't mean that we have to wait till then. I don't think it's a bad thing if we wait till the end of February to actually initiate certain things. I honestly don't. Time goes by quickly. I'm not so concerned with it, but I'm also not saying that you can't start things sooner. What I am saying is that with that full moon in Leo on the 12th and Mars going direct on February 23rd, we will feel like a lot clearer of what direction we're headed. We will understand much more why we're moving in the direction we're headed in, what feels worth my time, my energy, and my effort, right? On February 27th, we have a new moon in Pisces, and that, my loves, is the beginning of eclipse season. For those of you who have been following me here on YouTube and even way before that, you know I love eclipse seasons. I love eclipse seasons. I love focusing on eclipse seasons. I love teaching about eclipse seasons. I love observing what happens in eclipse seasons. Do I love experiencing eclipse seasons? No, not always. Absolutely not. It feels, I feel all the things. I go through all my own stuff. And, but every time after an eclipse season, there is clarity, there is growth, there is an understanding of myself in a greater way. This new moon in Pisces begins eclipse season, and I think that it is a beautiful, beautiful new moon because by that time, we will have the North Node in Pisces to set the intention to move through the upcoming eclipse season with soul, with the connection to spirit, with the connection to the light within. And allow for the things that are coming over the next couple of weeks in March, with the two eclipses in March, to really continue to show us the way. We will have a better idea. Remember, we'll have a clear sense of direction with Mars going direct on February 23rd. We will have a different level of confidence, I feel. But here comes eclipse season. There are still a few more things that we need to tie up loose ends with that are going to have a lot to do with relationships, communication, partnerships, contracts, and agreements. From March 1st through April 12th, we are going to have a Venus retrograde. And Venus is going to retrograde between Aries, back to Pisces, and then from Pisces, obviously, back into Aries. This is a big deal. I've been talking to you guys about this here and there, I think for a few months now. To me, this feels like understanding how the relationship with the past is really, we're really leaving it in the past, how our relationship to the past no longer really plays a role in our present moment, and what is our relationship to the future? What is our relationship to a new beginning? We're having a Venus retrograde in the last sign of the zodiac and the first sign of the zodiac. That is fascinating to me. On a more practical and common interpretation of a Venus retrograde, past lovers can come. Oh, and I believe that with a Venus retrograde in Pisces and into Aries. That's going to be very interesting for existing relationships, past relationships. I think it's going to be interesting for soulmate connections, especially in romantic relationships. Stay grounded. Don't just go and run off with that. But when we're talking about Venus and Pisces, Venus loves being in Pisces. We're talking about, romance. We're talking about the connection of kindred souls type of thing. We're talking about the relationship to that which we can't see, but we know that is there. I think that this is going to be a really interesting time in karmic relationships. I think a lot of them romantic, but also really beautiful potential for work partnerships, for professional relationships, for friendships, really beautiful time for that as well. At the same time of a Venus retrograde, we're going to have a Mercury retrograde because the universe is like, you know what? Why not? Why not have a Venus retrograde and a Mercury retrograde during an eclipse season? Let's spice things up a bit, okay? Let's spice 2025 up a bit. Okay. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde between Aries and Pisces, and then Pisces back into Aries. So, what Venus is doing in the relationship to life, the relationship to cycles, the relationship to relationships, the relationship to ourselves, Mercury is making sure that we are sure. Mercury is saying, okay, are you really observing what's happening here? Because Mercury retrograde is about slowing down, being more present. If this is in relationships, especially romantic relationships, and you are thinking about going back, Mercury retrograde is going to say, wait a minute. Have they changed? Has this dynamic changed from what it used to be in the past? Or are you putting on those rose-colored glasses like Venus in Pisces loves to do, like Mercury in Pisces loves to do? Are you looking at just the highlight reel? Are you just looking at the romantic part? Or has this truly changed at a soul level? That this is something that you can take with you into this next chapter of your life? Because remember, 2025 is a year of transition, setting us up for 2026, 2027, and on. So this Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and eclipse season is still a bit of an adjustment, a sharpening of our relationships. And then finally, we have a eclipse. It's a full moon eclipse in the sign of Virgo on March 14th. This full moon eclipse in the sign of Virgo closes off a 6-month energetic window of time that started in September with the new moon in Virgo of September 2nd. So after that, we will move into the spring equinox, which I'm not going to talk about here, right? Because I'm only talking about the season of this winter solstice. These are the events that are taking place at the time. This full moon in Virgo eclipse, I think, is going to highlight a lot of things around discernment. So let's say that between the new moon in Capricorn of December 30th and March, you've committed to things, you've done some work, you have created certain things behind in the background, right? Behind the scenes of whatever it is that you're creating or building or manifesting. By the time we get to this full moon eclipse in Virgo, I think we're going to have clarity to be able to say, okay, so in the next season, in the equinox season, maybe I don't do XYZ. But I will keep these other things because this system actually worked for me. But all of this other stuff is superfluous, right? It's going to give us great discernment around, again, it's another check-in point. How do I feel about this? Remember that mutable cross, right, of the winter solstice said, keep your eye on the prize, but remain flexible in the approach. So this full moon eclipse in Virgo of March 14th is saying, how are you changing the approach? Do you need to change the approach? Does this feel honest to you still? I think that a lot of things that we're going to initiate the year with are still going to feel, we're still going to feel connected to. But the way that we do it, the way that we move forward, we're going to gain more clarity, right? If this is in relationship, This is going to highlight a lot of dynamics of the day to day, a lot of dynamics around responsibilities. How are we splitting those? Who's doing what, right? And so this full moon in Virgo is going to highlight the things that we have been either ignoring on purpose because we don't want to deal with them, right? And that's understandable. Sometimes we don't want to deal with things, but they will always come back for us to deal with them. Or things that we just haven't seen, especially because the South Node is transiting there. And wherever the South Node transits, usually tends to be things we don't want to see because it's things we have to deal with, it's things we have to be very honest about. And in Virgo, you want to be mindful of the inner critic. You want to be mindful of the controlling, right? The inner controller, the inner doer that wants to do 24/7. So that's what that is going to bring, amongst other things. And of course, I am going to touch on each one of these events in every single weekly forecast. But now you have an idea. Now you have a greater picture of the next couple of months, bits and points, what they mean. Set your intentions, remain flexible in the approach, make sure it's aligned with your heart and soul. And I will see you. I will continue seeing you every single Sunday. As always, may this be of service. So much love to you. I'm still doing the 2025 reading year ahead. Book it down below. And I will talk to you next week. Much love. Oh, happy holidays for those who celebrate. Happy holidays. Much love to you.